Way back over 6 weeks ago, when the San Francisco District Attorney held her press conference to describe the attack on Paul Pelosi and the charges against the suspect David DePape, she repeatedly cautioned against undue speculation about what happened, because the facts will soon be established. And sure, simply releasing the body cam footage would accomplish both the establishment of the facts and an end to the speculation, but after all, there's a process and a rule to do that. Now, of course, it's a totally new rule that San Francisco law enforcement has never applied in all the other recent cases where body cam footage has been released within days of an officer-involved incident. But nonetheless, there is a rule. When it's introduced in court, then the body cam footage will be public.
When and if will we see the body cam footage from the cops?
When it is made available during a court proceeding. That's the way that this works.
But will it become public?
If it is played in a court proceeding, it will be public then.
If it's made available during a court proceeding, then you'll see the body cam footage. That's the way this works. Except for during this court proceeding, where that's not the way this works anymore. The body cam footage was played in court this week, but no, you still can't see it, and they won't even give us the courtesy of making up some new fake rule to explain why. Pelosi's accused attacker David DePape appeared in San Francisco Superior Court on Wednesday, a hearing at which the judge ruled that the DA's office has presented sufficient evidence to move forward to trial on all charges, the most serious of which being premeditated attempted murder. The evidence presented included testimony from a responding officer and the officer who interviewed him when he confessed post-arrest. There was even a demonstration of the famed hammer that was the attempted murder weapon, and yes, 15 seconds of the police body cam footage was played. But there are no cameras or recordings allowed in this courtroom. Only certain reporters were allowed in, and the TV that actually played the footage was angled away from them. So sure, we would all love to see this video, but just like a Pawn Stars meme, the best they can do is a very brief clip characterized by secondhand descriptions from people who could only hear it, not actually see it. But at least now we have some additional clarity about what exactly happened at the Pelosi doorstep immediately prior to the infamous hammer beating that's all caught on the video that you're not allowed to see. Recall, last we left the story, there was a discrepancy between the account of the feds and the account of San Francisco authorities. The feds in their court filing say that the police opened the door at the home prior to encountering Pelosi and DePape. The district attorney says Paul Pelosi opened the door for them, a seemingly minor distinction, but one that is important in that it's an indicator of Paul Pelosi's state of mind. If he opened the door and didn't retreat to police protection, if instead he went back inside the home toward his attacker, why? All the evidence introduced at this court hearing says that is indeed an important question to consider, because all the evidence here says that is indeed the case. Paul did, in fact, open the door. According to multiple reporters in the room, the footage shows the door being opened for police, not police opening the door. Yes, these reporters can only hear it, not see it, but they do offer timestamps of the knocking point and the door opening point, followed by conversation. The police officer who interviewed DePape upon arrest testified that Paul opened the door as well, which is consistent with prior national and local news reports citing sources who have seen the footage.
And the video clearly shows Paul Pelosi open the door with his left hand.
The front door was opened by Mr. Pelosi. The 82-year-old did not immediately declare an emergency or try to leave his home, but instead began walking several feet back into the foyer toward the assailant and away from police.
And by the way, this courtroom evidence is additional support for that national NBC reporter Miguel Almaguer, who was suspended by the network for his story making this claim more than a month ago, even though it's all backed up by additional sourcing now. They brought him back this week after apparently sending him to live with Bigfoot in the Sierra Nevada as punishment.
We're going to start this morning, though, with that severe winter weather.
The storm system out here just blanketed this area under several feet of snow.
So he's back with absolutely no commentary on why they disappeared him into the mountains for over a month, even though we can all see that the reporting for which he was suspended aligns with the other points of facts now emerging. So it seems everyone aligns against the Fed's account of what happened, that Paul Pelosi opened the door. If Paul opened the door and the attack happened inside, well, then we know that Miguel Almaguer's original reporting that Paul went back inside and did not retreat outside is correct. Everyone agrees on that except the feds, and apparently, and oddly, David DePape himself. During his police interview, which was also played at the hearing, a transcript of which is now available, but not the actual recording, DePape said upon police encounter at the Pelosi home, the door was open and the cops were standing there, meaning they must have opened it. I don't know what to make of that, but of course people who know DePape say he fried his brain with drugs, so perhaps just that fact is sufficient to explain why he and he alone agrees with the feds. Also supported by courtroom evidence is the seemingly silly account of the hammer attack itself, and particularly the dialogue that accompanied it. In the DA's court filing, the story is that police told DePape to drop the hammer, and DePape responded, quote, nope, before DePape lunged at Pelosi and struck him, all over ongoing verbal objection and apparently insufficient physical intervention. Everyone watched and narrated the attack, but nobody actually stopped it. That was the characterization, which I find awfully hard to believe, but that is what these reporters who saw or at least heard the footage say happened. Nope is indeed part of the commentary, and the entirety of this attack and the conversation during it fits within the 15-second time frame, according to two reporters' accounts of the footage. That doesn't make the circumstances any less bizarre, though. Of course, through DePape's interview recording, we get some additional details about his strategy of breaking into a place with security everywhere, but also no security whatsoever. Asked by the interviewing officer, "How did you get in?" DePape responds, "It was not easy. There were cameras everywhere, 1,000 cameras. I broke through the glass door with the hammer. I tried to turn the handle, but it was locked, so I body slammed through it, and none of this tripped any security system or even awoke Paul Pelosi. So it wasn't easy. I really had to think and to strategize by just throwing my body at the door in the loudest, most obvious way possible, all recorded by the unavoidable cameras with 1,000 other video angles that we don't get to see either. And stranger still are the circumstances of the 911 call, which was also played at this hearing, and no, you don't get to listen to that either. Recall, the original claim was that Paul Pelosi had to speak with emergency dispatch using coded language so as not to alert or enrage DePape. But also, DePape participated in this 911 call by telling dispatch that he's a friend of the Pelosi's. That is actually the way the reporting from the courtroom Wednesday characterizes the call. Paul Pelosi being careful, trying to notify dispatch of his distress, but not to tip off or anger DePape. The transcript generally aligns with that characterization. Pelosi says he doesn't need emergency responders, but there is a man in his house. Asked who the man is, Paul says he doesn't know, and DePape responds giving his name and saying he's a friend of the family. So the idea is that Paul is talking with emergency dispatch on something of a secret or at least non-obvious basis to avoid alerting DePape that he's actually requesting assistance from police. But the trouble is that other new characterizations of this call presented at this court hearing don't align with that description. The officer who interviewed DePape after his arrest testified that DePape actually directed the call, giving Paul instructions for what to say. However, the judge said that Paul pushed DePape into a corner by calling the police in the first place, and that the call enraged DePape into making threats. DePape himself was clearly aware that the call was placed to 911, not just based on the call transcript showing his participation, but based on his post-arrest interview in which he says he was aware that Paul had called police and that they were coming. So we're still left with a bizarre mix of contradictions here. David DePape was enraged by a phone call that he directed, participated in, and allowed to continue. Paul Pelosi couldn't risk alerting DePape of this phone call that DePape directed, participated in, and allowed to continue. David DePape didn't want any police intervention, which is why he knowingly gave his real name to emergency dispatch to confirm his hostile presence in the Pelosi home. And I don't even mean to say that these inconsistencies show with certainty that investigators and authorities are clearly lying. A lot of nonsense can happen if this guy actually is as drug-fried and mentally ill as many who know him say he is. It's just that these contradictions are impossible to reconcile without actually hearing the conversation for myself. And if I can't do that, even though the circumstances necessary for the public release of that recording have now come and gone, and I still can't do that, well, then you're telling me I have no choice but to listen to the drug-fried ramblings and to try to make sense of them, so I might as well go all in. And actually, in fairness, I have no evidence to say that DePape's son's commentary is drug-fried. It's just that it sounds drug-fried, so I'll speculate that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or that the smoke doesn't drift far from the bong, or whatever the proper equivalent drug metaphor would be. But that is the additional piece of evidence this week. DePape's 19-year-old son, Sky Gonzalez, speaking with the Daily Mail, saying that for all we know, his dad was a Pelosi sex slave. Likewise, he doesn't have any evidence of such an arrangement, but he does have knowledge of his dad. And he says that the political motivations assigned to him are incorrect. He says his dad is a critic of both major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. He believes his dad is a member of the Green Party, that his dad has progressive political views, and certainly is not the sort of right-wing conservative that many have branded him. The most important piece of this interview, though, is what Gonzalez says about trying to visit his dad in jail. He says he has tried to set up a jailhouse meeting with his father, but has not been successful. So why not? Is the key question to ask. Is Gonzalez just a I'll get around to it later type of guy, or was he actually denied visitation? I'm no expert on California state prisoner visitation rules, but I gather that prisoners don't have a right to visitation, and there's something of a case-by-case evaluation to restrict visitation on whatever terms officials see fit. Of course, complicating that evaluation is the fact that DePape is not convicted. He is only accused. Denial of visitation in that context would seem especially harsh. And to be clear, we can't say based only on this interview that is what's happening, but we can say that this fits in a context of as little information getting out as possible. Because it is notable that DePape has still said nothing publicly, not through any friends or family who have visited him, not even through his lawyer, a public defender who, as far as I can see, offered no commentary after this hearing on Wednesday, and who was reportedly extremely brief with his cross-examinations in the courtroom. In fact, the only public commentary from DePape's lawyer I can find is a similarly brief press conference after the initial court hearing on November 1st, during which he said a million different ways, I have no information to provide.
Do you expect to release a statement from your client anytime soon?
That's something he and I will need to work on before we do anything like that. So not in the very near future. I'm not going to add to all the speculation by talking about the facts of this case right now.
He doesn't want to add to the speculation by talking about the facts, even though it's the absence of facts that leads to the speculation. I get that DePape is a man of modest means. He's just a humble bracelet salesman without many sales to speak of, according to his son. And I get that translates to a similarly modest legal representation too. I'm sure San Francisco is not sending their best to represent this guy. But you can't tell me that neither DePape, nor his lawyer, nor his family, nor his friends have any interest in getting a single word out publicly to explain his perspective in his defense against all the media smears. Like every other piece of evidence in this story, the closest thing we have to that is a recording played to somebody else and then described back to us secondhand, like we're playing the game of telephone, not informing the public and pursuing justice. Because as crazy as DePape's son's sex slave commentary may sound, the key phrase in it is, for all we know. When all we know is next to zero, then any drug-inspired vision quest about what happened is worthy of some consideration. And at this rate, I probably shouldn't be so dismissive of drug-inspired vision quests anyway. My brain probably would be better off drug-fried than gone mad trying to follow this story. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Gab. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.